Okay, it looks like we've got a good number of folks online. So before we get going, I have just a couple of quick announcements and we'll hand it off to Pablo Bauleo for the DERMS and grid flexibility discussion. First off, my name is Pete Eberle. I'm with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, and I want to thank you all for joining us here tonight. This recording or this webinar, like all the others, will be recorded, and we should have it out on our YouTube channel here in a few weeks. I will, if you need it sooner, I'm going to try to, I think I can embed it in the follow-up emails. Otherwise, email me and I'll get you the link. But for those of you who are not familiar with CRES, CRES and our local chapters provide education, policy advocacy, and community engagement that accelerate Colorado towards a carbon neutral future powered by 100% renewable energy. Founded in 1996, CRES is a statewide nonpartisan 501c3 that is supported by our sustaining individual and business members as well as donations. You can sign up for our newsletter, event announcements, and follow us on social media at cres-energy.org. That's CRES-energy.org. Make sure to follow our YouTube channel. We've garnered over 1.4 million views, and I think we are just pushed over 260 videos of recent. And if you want to go back into the archives, we have some older presentations as well. A couple quick announcements on upcoming events. This Thursday, March 27th in Golden, Colorado at 7 p.m., we will have Nuclear's Promise for Colorado, Hyper Hope. That will be at 7 p.m., Golden, Colorado. It will also be streaming, and that'll feature Dr. Chuck Kutcher, who is a volunteer here with CRES's policy committee. He formerly worked at NCRES and actually started his career, from my understanding, working in DOE on nuclear stuff. So he's a pretty knowledgeable person to discuss what this really means for Colorado, if anything. And then on Thursday, April 10th, sorry, I hope I didn't get the date wrong on my slides. I've got my date wrong on my notes here. We will have Pathways to Deep Decarbonation in Colorado's Electric Sector by 2040. This will feature Keith Hay of the Colorado Energy Office, and it really centers around the results from the work they've done, as well as the Ascend Analytics study that looks at different portfolios and pathways to deeply decarbonize our electricity sector, and which ones, sort of what the results were. So that'll be a really good one. That will be a webinar, again, Thursday, April 10th at 6 p.m. And then we do have a couple more events that we're working on for April with the other chapters. So as I mentioned, make sure to follow us and you'll get the notices on those. But the next in-person meeting for those of us up here in Fort Collins will be on Tuesday, May 6th, 6 p.m. at Odell Brewing. It'll be Performance Path to Zero Carbon Construction with Brad Smith with City of Fort Collins. So we're having a really big run of Fort Collins presentations, but they're all working on great work. And this is a really, really important one if you're into building efficiency. Really, it's a huge, huge part of the puzzle if we're going to decarbonize. So again, you can sign up for those events, cres-energy.org. And without any further ado, Pablo, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Peter. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here with CRES. It's really nice being able to meet you all virtually. And I hope my accent is not too thick tonight. I grew up in Argentina. I will try to speak slow, but at times I get excited. Renewable energy and energy management is a passion of mine, so I might get excited and speed up a bit, but I will do my best to speak slow. And I'm here to talk about, grid flexibility and what is grid flexibility. So just a small agenda as to what topics I'm going to cover. First, I just want to explain a little bit or make clear what is the challenge we're trying to solve. Through the presentation, you will see these three acronyms very often. DER, DERMS, and BPPs. So I'm going to explain what those things are. I'm then going to move into the Peak Partners program that we have for Collins Utilities. And then I will move into grid flexibility, 3 main use cases that we call them run like the wind, bright like the sun, and time of day. Those are just, working names that we gave them. And then towards the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned that we have for all the programs we run here at Fort Collins Utilities. So what is the challenge we're trying to solve? Why do we need grid flexibility? Well, basically it goes down, to wind and clouds variability and the fact that we cannot truly dispatch the wind or the solar energy. And, there are these things that you might have your kid playing with a kite, or you might be, an astronomy geek like me, and you are getting ready to observe, this total solar eclipse, but then there are clouds and move, and all of a sudden the clouds move in and cover the view of the sun, or the wind stops blowing, and the fastest thing that happened there is the meltdown of your kid because she cannot play with her kite any longer. But basically, working with renewable energy means that it's not dispatchable, or technically, I should say, working with wind and solar energy means we cannot dispatch that, we cannot schedule those energy resources, and we need to find ways to work with that. So that is what the DERs, the DERMS, and the BPPs are capable of doing, dealing with the intermittence or non-dispatchability of solar and aeolic energy. So just to make, an example to help me explain a bit better what are these DERs. Let's imagine, as I have on this picture here on the right, that you have an orchestra, but there is no orchestra conductor. You still have the full orchestra with all the sections like the brass, the winds, strings, not all the individual instruments there, the cellos and the drums and all the things. The parallel to the electric grid will be that you have Wi-Fi thermostat, you have batteries, you have electric cars, you have these GIWH, grid interactive water heaters. I will explain in a second what they are. But basically, all these different systems are in the electric grid. And, you might then have different make and models like the F-150 for an EV, or an Ecobee or an Nest for a thermostat. So the Nest, the Ecobee, the Powerwall will be the equivalent to the trumpets, the drums, and the oboes that you have in the orchestra. And in any electric grid, you will have all these systems, but they're going to be doing whatever they want to do, or whatever the owner, the resident, tells them to do. You are lacking an orchestra conductor to provide services to the grid. So here I have this orchestra conductor that will be the DERMS, is what organizes and harmonizes all the different instruments. Now in this image, I have the orchestra conductor, but I have no musicians. So you will have a lot of DERs, a lot of instruments without the orchestra conductor, or you could have the orchestra conductor, the software, the DERMS, without the musicians, and you won't get anything. You need both of them together, all of them together. You need the orchestra and the conductor to be together, and then they can perform different music. They could do Four Seasons or Moonlight Sonata or the Top Gun anthem. I actually found that by an orchestra on YouTube. It was quite neat to listen to that piece. And what I'm trying to say here is that the different music sheets, the different music that they play, are the different things that you need on the grid. It could be peak management. It could be to mitigate the solar off ramp. it could be the duct curve management, it could be the BPPs, and all these different things is what we can provide through grid flexibility. Now, what is BPP? Well, honestly, it's kind of like a big marketing thing these days. Everything is a BPP, but BPP stands for Virtual Power Plant. And what we're really talking about here is to have all the instruments, all the DERs, together with the orchestra conductor to be dispatched in a way that traditionally you will have maybe scheduled a power resource like a natural gas peaker, but that instead of having to schedule the natural gas peaker for 3 hours or 6 hours, probably more like 8 to 10, you can actually tell all this equipment, all these thermostats, all these electric vehicles, all these batteries to do different things to mimic and create a virtual power plant. So that is perhaps certainly the most complicated and sophisticated way to coordinate all the different instruments. So let's now move a little bit to Fort Collins and the Peak Partners program. This slide I can go fast because I believe most of the people are familiar with Fort Collins. Perhaps the thing that I want to highlight here is that Fort Collins works with Platte River. They are our she and T. That means that they run the power plants. They coordinate all the generation and transmission. Fort Collins Utilities only does the distribution. We pick up the energy from the substation and then deliver it to homes and residences. We have extremely aggressive climate plans, goals, 100% renewable electricity by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2050. This is one of the main drivers that we have to be doing, among other things, grid flexibility. And this is, I'm getting a little bit technical here. I'm not sure how many of you in the audience have a background in utilities, but these acronyms basically means that we have a fully automated metering system, data analytics about the consumption on the meters, and the DERMS is this orchestra conductor that I was talking about, that the name of it, the name of the software is IntelliSource. And we have done all these systems for over 10 years. So we have a fair amount of experience on how to do this work. So what is the Peak Partners program or programs? We have many of them actually under the umbrella. We work with Wi-Fi thermostats. We can do direct install. You can give us a call and we show up at your place and you get a free thermostat that is Wi-Fi. We also do what is called BYOT, or bring your own thermostat. That is because there are manufacturers like Ecobee or Honeywell, Nest, just to name a few of them, that you have that thermostat, you bought it, and you want to participate in a program from your utility. Actually, if everything goes right and you happen to have a Honeywell or Residio thermostat starting tomorrow, you will get messages from Honeywell inviting you to participate on the Fort Collins Utilities programs. So we enroll people with their own thermostats. If your thermostat is not one that is compatible with the system, but you want to be in the program, you give us a call and we show up your home and install one of them. We also work with standard electric water heaters. Is this box here? We just retrofit this box to the water heater. We work with the grid interactive water heaters. I might take a second here to explain the difference between these two. A standard electric water heater, with this box, we can tell it when to turn off, when to not heat water. But then, some years ago, several years ago, the technology has evolved, and since 2020, actually, in Fort Collins, we have a small group of grid interactive water heaters. And these ones, we can tell them to turn off, like now is not a good time to heat up water, or we can also tell them to turn on, like this is a great time to consume energy. So it's bidirectional. We can tell it, to consume energy or to not consume energy. We also have some electric vehicles. We do telematics and EVSE. With telematics, what I refer to here is we talk directly to the car, not to the charging station. It's for connected cars. And the EVSE is when we are talking with the charging stations themselves. And we are, for the time being, only doing it at the fleet level. Later this year, we're going to start a very small rollout of residential charging stations. We also use OpenADR, that is a communication protocol that mainly is used with our commercial and industrial customers. And what I'm really talking about here is all these equipments. These are the instruments of the orchestra that I was talking about. We have all these different drums and cellos and violins and whatnot. That is what these thermostats and whatnot do for us. Now, I was talking about, the different music sheet, the different songs that we can perform, the different pieces. Currently, we are doing peak savings, time of day load shifting, solar noon consumption, solar off-ramp management, and overnight wind consumption. We have all these different music sheets that we can play, combining the DERs, all the equipment, the water heaters, electric cars, the thermostats, and IntelliSource, our DERMS. These are a few future functions that we know we're going to prepare for. One of them is with beneficial electrification. We anticipate to have winter peak management needs. So we're starting to prepare for that. This probably is at least 10 years out, if not more. And the energy imbalance market is something that, together with Platte River, we might start participating in a couple of years. So again, we have a lot of different instruments, all these different DERs, and we have different music sheets that we can perform based on what the grid needs at each point. Now, what are, the greatest hits? What are the ones that we play often? Well, we just call them Run Like the Wind, Time of Use, and Bright Like the Sun. Time of Use was named by our great analyst. Run Like the Wind and Bright Like the Sun were named by me. I tend to be a little bit more colorful when I came up with names. Let me walk you through what they do. Why is that, we need these use cases? At night, typically, we have a very wind-rich resource mix. There tends to be a lot of wind in, our resource mix with Platte River. So what we can do is to tell the electric cars to, instead of charging up on the early evening, people come back home or things like that. So 6, 7, 8 p.m. is when people tend normally to charge. We want to shift that to the middle of the night, because that way we capture all that wind that blows in the middle of the night. And at the same time, we're mitigating the solar off-ramp. It's like often people think the middle of the day, there is a lot of sun, all the solar panels are pushing energy into the grid. That's great. But at the end of the day, when the sun goes down, solar energy kind of like goes away as a resource. And remember, they're not being able to dispatch these things. It's like, it's gone when the sun goes down. Actually, a bit before that, it's gone. And we need to speed up, so to speak, all the other resources, all the other generations. So what we can do is to mitigate the solar off-ramp, that is this challenge the utility faces. As the sun goes down, we lose that resource. So we need to slow down, so to speak, how people use electricity at the time of solar off-ramp. So that's why I say here we shift from early evening to overnight. And another thing I want to mention is often the utilities talk about peak management, those few hours of the year when the utility, the grid reaches peak, everybody's using energy. We've been doing that since 1982. We know how to do peak management at Fort Collins Utility. We're actually probably one of the few utilities that is doing valley management because we're shifting energy to the middle of the night when there is a resource mix that is wind-rich, and we are increasing the consumption of wind, which then is for the electric cars, which means the energy used by our transportation is cleaner than otherwise. The main resource that we have for this are the electric vehicles. We're also getting ready to start doing some work with water heaters. Time of use. This is, those of you that live in Fort Collins probably have heard, are familiar with this thing that there are hours of the day on weekdays that the electricity is more expensive and times that it is cheaper. So our time of use is we optimize the water heaters. Remember, I was telling them we can tell the water heaters when to turn off, and even with the fancy ones, with the Grid Interactive, we can tell them when to turn on. We can actually get them to run preferentially during the off-peak hours, so that way people save money. Because we are mitigating the peak load, we are extending the operational life of our assets, all the transformers, all the conductors, the cables, they will last longer because they don't get pushed as hard. And one thing also I want to mention, maybe I save that for later on the water heaters. Let's go to bright like the sun. Let's keep talking about the greatest hits. So what we're doing here is we're optimizing for solar non-consumption. I expect most of you are familiar with something that is called the DAC curve, but what I'm talking about here is solar noon is very sunny, all the solar panels are generating. Often in the residential case, on the distributed rooftop solar distributed panels, you are generating more than you are consuming in your house. So you have extra energy being pushed into the grid. And potentially, if there were to be a lot of energy being pushed into the grid, you could have a reverse power flow. That means energy will go up to the substation that could create some issues. So what we're doing here is on bright like the sun, we're telling equipment to consume energy. Again, there is a lot of solar energy in the grid, no carbon energy that could create some issues in the grid. Other utilities are curtailing, are literally telling the inverters to turn off because they have more solar energy that they can consume. And personally, to me, that is, is a sin, is a cardinal sin, is zero carbon energy. We should never tell the equipment to turn off, the inverter to turn off. We need to find a way to utilize that energy. And again, water heaters and electric vehicles are the best resources that we have. So let's go to this slide that one of my coworkers, tease me and say that this is the Christmas slide for the colors I choose. We have three swimming lines here are the three cases: time of day, run like the wind, bright like the sun. In red, what I show is what are the hours of the day that we don't want people to consume energy in support of that particular use case. In green, dark green, is when we want people to actually consume energy. And in the light green is you can consume, you cannot, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really has a negative or very positive impact on the grid. Now, a few things I want to mention here is you might notice that what we tell people or what we would like people or equipment to do depends with the day type, like Monday to Friday versus Saturday, Sunday, or holidays, or even the season of the year, winter, summer, standard time, daylight saving. So each one of these use cases is a little bit different on when it operates. And at times I've been told by some people, but you are sending confusing messages, you have to tell everybody to do the same thing. And it's kind of like, no, what we're trying to do is to find what things are needed for the grid, and then to identify what makes the most sense to each customer. If we're trying to force everyone into doing the same thing, we're doing what Henry Ford did about, you can pick any color as long as you pick black. What we're trying to do here is to find, the right use case for the right customer, or to not force, a square peg on a round hole. We offer customers options, and customers can choose which ones is easier or more convenient to them. And some customers even are in more than one of these use cases. They enroll themselves in more than one of them. And then the other thing I also want to mention on this slide is that these three use cases, I'm speaking fast, need to slow down. These three use cases are live. We've been doing time of day since 2018. We've been doing bright like the sun since 2020, and bright like the wind since 2023. So again, we have a fair amount of experience on what works and what doesn't. Now, when you're doing grid flexibility, you need to consider, the capabilities of the DER, the scale, how many of those DERs, and the frequency, how often you can operate them. So if you were to have an electric car, and let's even be, progressive, forward thinking here, let's imagine that we have a vehicle to grid, which at this point is only, kind of like laboratory test. If you were to have an electric car, or even a battery, a stationary battery like a Tesla Powerball or something like that, the capability of that DER is pretty high. That's why, I put it here on this axis all the way to the top. You can tell it to turn off, you can tell it to turn on, you can tell it to export power into the grid. Now, the scale of this is relatively low. Yes, I see electric cars all the time, but the majority of the cars I see are not electric. They're still ICEs, or even with batteries. We see more and more and more batteries in town, but there are still a relatively low number, we're in the low hundreds. And the frequency is like, how often can you really do something? With electric cars, maybe you can do it once a day. That's as much as I think you can really operate them, exercise them, before someone might say, you know what, this is too much. I might not be cool being in the program. At least in our program, we use them once per day. Now, if we look at the grid interactive water heaters, well, the capability is still high. We can tell them to turn off. We can tell them to turn on. We cannot tell them to export energy into the grid, because the grid interactive water heater has converted electric power into temperature, into thermal storage. So they cannot export into the grid. The scale, the number of them, we think that in Fort Collins, we can easily have more grid interactive water heaters than electric cars, or at least in the program, maybe not the total number in town, but I will be willing to be in the program. So the scale of the grid interactive water heaters is higher than the electric cars. And the frequency is pretty high. Right now we're using them 5-6 times a day, and people are perfectly good with that. And this is what I wanted to say before, but I thought about saving it for now. With the grid interactive water heaters, we might tell them to turn on. That's perfectly fine. We can tell them to turn off, and that's perfectly fine until you run out of hot water. But these water heaters are smart enough, they have local intelligence, so they kind of like are monitoring how much hot water is left on the tank, the 40 or 50 gallon tank. And the way we're operating them now is like when they are about halfway empty, we allow them to run for 5 minutes and get a little bit more of energy. So during an active event in which we tell all the grid interactive water heaters to not run, every now and then some of the water heaters might pop in and out and use a little bit of energy. That is to ensure that the participants in the program do not run out of hot water. But at the same time, it's maybe 1 or 2 water heaters at a time out of the hundreds that we have in the program that are consuming energy. So that's really a win-win situation for the utility and for the customer. Then if we're talking of the thermostats, the capabilities that you have with the thermostat is even less than with grid interactive water heaters. Basically, they can only play one song, peak management. You can do a little bit of other things, but that's the main thing that they can play. The scale probably is the largest one, about 2 out of 3 homes in Fort Collins have some cooling system. Potentially 1 out of 2 could be compatible with our programs, either through the bring your own or by the direct install with the thermostats that you can give us a call and we install on your home. So the scale is the highest one. Now the frequency is probably the lowest one of them all. You can only tweak people's set points so much before people say, I'm done with this program. You find somebody else. We know that we can do it once a week. We know that maybe we can push the envelope and do it twice a week. If we go more than that, people start giving us a call and say, hey guys, I'm out of this. So when you're putting together a grid flexibility program, you need to look at this triangle of capability, scale, and frequency, and look at how you cover the whole triangle with the DERs that you have at hand. Right now, we cannot cover all the surface of this triangle. We're working towards that. We have a good area that is covered, but we still have here, the capability scale corner is the one that is a little bit lacking. And now let's go a bit into the program details. I took you from what are the DERMS and the DERs to having all this equipment installed and turning them off and turning them on and things like that. So one of the programs we run, the Smart Water Heater program, we use it currently for 2 use cases and pretty soon for the 3 of them. So it's bright like the sun and time of day, pretty soon run like the wind. And the program is kind of, very straightforward in a way. You give us a call, we show up at your house and we replace your water heater. And yeah, it sounds kind of crazy, but that's really what we're doing. Here there are some statistics as to how much energy they can absorb. So these are 40-gallon water heaters, and participants in the program get a free water heater with ongoing maintenance. The water heater will shift the consumption of your energy, and you're going to save about 1/3 of the annual operating costs. Now, because this is such a screaming deal, and at Fort Collins Utility, we take equity, as a very big thing. We lead with equity as much as we can in all of our activities. We deploy the majority of these water heaters into low and moderate income households. We have specific communication channels to communicate and to enroll them. We're also going into some condos now that often is more like moderate income customers. And what is that, we, the utility, and all of us, because we're a municipal utility, get out of all these water heaters. So this slide, we have called it a day in the life of a grid interactive water heater. Let me walk you through it. This is not a single water heater. This is the fleet of water heaters, all of them put together. It's a little bit of an old slide. It's from 2021. At that time, I think we had around 75 water heaters. We were just past the pilot phase and starting to grow up the resource. The green line is telling us how much energy the water heaters can absorb, can consume. if we tell them to turn on. This brown little line here is whenever they are consuming electricity. So the water heaters are doing their thing, as you know, here at 8 in the morning. Probably a lot of people are just, maybe taking showers, fixing, breakfast or whatnot. You need a little bit of water heater. That's where you see some energy consumption. Again, this is the amount of energy that can be consumed. And then at 10 in the morning, we start to pre-cool the water heaters. That means that the amount of energy that they can absorb starts to go up and up and up. And then we hit solar noon, when we tell them now is a great time to turn on and consume energy. So you get to see here this brown line increasing rapidly and the green line decreasing. That is because we are consuming energy. And this is another time when we consume energy. This is around 4:30. We're telling the water heaters to top off, because then we're getting into the on-peak expensive hours. And then there is this final peak of the day, that is when you are participants, will be consuming electricity when the on-peak hours end and we move into the off-peak hours when it's cheaper. So here in the middle of the day, the utility and every resident is benefiting from having the grid flexibility, the consumption of extra solar energy that is on the grid. We are decarbonizing. And later on the day, the participants of the program are benefiting because they're saving money. The utility, which is municipal, it means everybody benefits at some extent on this, is also extending the lifetime of our assets, of our capital assets. So everybody benefits. And what we are working on, we're not quite ready, is to have also some increase of consumption here in the middle of the night when there is abundant wind energy. So the idea here is really to move the time to decouple the time that you use hot water relative to the time that is ideal to heat up the hot water that you are going to be using on your house. Some lessons learned. We have about 200 of these water heaters deployed. We need around 2,000 by 2030. One thing we learned very promptly is that there are very few homes that have this type of water heaters installed. So actually, one of the things that we're working, and Peter was mentioning my friend and colleague, Brad Smith, that is going to be presenting to you in about a month. He's working with the building department to update the building code. So all new electric water heaters will be compatible with this CTA 2045. This is just a communication standard. So in the future, in a few years from now, instead of having to actually install the full water heater, we only need to install this little piece here, the communication module. But currently, because there aren't really that many homes that have these water heaters, we are installing the water heater, which means we need to have plumber, storage, supply chain considerations. We need to have cost considerations. It's not cheap at this point to do this program. So we're trying to target it as much as possible to the LMI segment. Another thing that you need to do is you need to offer free repairs. One thing that we experienced was one of the person that says, yes, I want to be in the program. We install the water heater. 2 months later, the water heater failed, an early failure, at times it happens. We noticed that we lost connectivity with the water heater. We waited a little bit. We didn't know what was going on. Then we reach out to the customer like, hey, that we don't have connectivity. Should we go and maybe check this little this little white adapter or something? And the customer say, oh, the water heater failed and I didn't know what to do. So I just called my plumber and had it replaced. The customer bought his own water heater, but we lost the asset at that point. So we realized that, we need to offer ongoing maintenance to keep the asset at hand. And then, as I was mentioning, we have developed special channels to reach out the LMI segment through different housing authorities and charitable organizations to be able to deploy these brand new, really nice water heaters among those that needed them the most. Let's now shift gears a little bit and talk about the smart charging program, the one that at times we refer to like run like the wind. This is a program that is telematics based. That means that it only works with a select group of make and models. These are connected cars. You know, not all the electric cars are connected, but literally earlier today, I got, an updated spreadsheet, and there are over 300 make and models of electric cars that are connected. So the number of connected cars is growing. What we do here is we delay the charging session to 1 in the morning to capture, the overnight wind. Now, one thing I also want to mention, we really think not just what is good for the utility, what is good for the customer. We only delay at-home charging sessions. If you are down in Denver and you are trying, to get enough electricity, enough charge in your car to drive back to Fort Collins, and it's like 6 or 7 p.m. and the sun starts going down, we talk to the car. It doesn't matter where the car is, we can talk to it. And the car will talk back to us. The car is going to tell us, hey, I'm not at home. So we are not going to delay the charging session. So if you are driving back home, or if you are running errands in town and you need to top it off to make it back home, at the grocery store or something, you can do that. Of course, customer can opt out from any delay charging sessions. If you know that evening you need to go somewhere because you're getting together with friends or going out for dinner, you can say, you know what, you just push a button, or actually it's through an email. You can say, tonight, I'm not going to participate in the program. Another thing that we can do is the car communicates with us, and if the battery is below 35%, the car will automatically opt out of participation on that event, on that particular night. So it's a little bit like the water heater program, that has this safety net that, you don't get a cold shower, you always have enough hot water. We have built the program to make sure that people always have enough charge to do whatever they need to get wherever they need to go. And on the previous program, people save money by shifting energy from the expensive on-peak hours to the more affordable or cheaper off. No, did I say that right? They don't use electricity on peak and use electricity on off-peak. They shift to the cheaper time. For the electric cars participants, we just offer them an incentive of $120 per year to be in the program. And that roughly is in average about 1/3 of the fuel cost per year. It varies, it really depends on how much you drive your car, but that's ballpark what you can expect across a large number of cars. And now let's look at a day in the life of an electric charging session. This plot that I'm showing you here is actually, it was data collected by Platte River Power Authority, so thank you to them for sharing the data with us. And this is when people will normally use electricity to charge their cars. So we see there is this big bump here, 7, 8, 9 p.m., people get home, they might delay a little bit the start of the charging session, but then typically around 7, 8, 9, there is this big spike here. And not much in the middle of the night. You might see a little bit of charging early in the morning and kind of like pretty flat through the day. This is what I was referring to, about the solar off-ramp hours, more like here, probably the 7 p.m. or even in summer, it could be 8 p.m. or not. So we don't want this peak here. We want it up here, really, shortly after midnight. So that way we mitigate the solar off-ramp. We want to slow down how fast people use electricity as the sun goes down, and we want to increase the middle of the night when there is a lot of wind. So this other plot is a little bit messy right now, but I will remove the original plot. You see that there is like a big bump here, and here there is a reduced consumption. So let's just only look at what we can do with the cars in the program. This is an average, and the previous plot also was average, over many cars, over many days. What you can see is that at 9 o'clock, there is still an increase, but not as big as it was before. These are all the cars that their charging is, or battery actually has a status of charge less than 35%, and perhaps someone that proactively says, not today. So there is still some people charging at 9 p.m., but less than otherwise. And you have here a lot of cars that get charged up in the middle of the night when we have, the wind-rich resource mix. This is what I was referring to as we're doing valley management, not just peak management. So again, reduce evening peak and wind-rich charging. That's perfect. As you know, we're supporting solar energy off-ramp here, and we are supporting aeolic energy here. This is kind of like, music to my ears. So lessons learned so far. We have about 150 electric cars that are enrolled. As I mentioned, there are many make and models. Literally earlier today, I saw a spreadsheet of the latest ecosystem is over 300, but the reality is most of those cars in the program are Teslas. It just has to do with market share. Teslas and Nissan Leafs are basically 95% of the market share on electric cars in Fort Collins. Then you have some Fords and BMWs and other things, but Teslas and Nissan Leafs are the vast majority. This only works with connected EVs. So depending on the car that you have, you might have to pay a fee to the manufacturer to have your car connected. If you have the car connected, you have your app, you can do different things on your phone with the car, so you have other benefits. But it could cost money to the customers to be connected. So you have to offer them some incentive to participate. One of the things that we did in this program, this is more if there is any utility types here in the audience, leverage DMB and meter data to target the customer for enrollments. We did it, and we had fantastic enrollment rates. Typically within 2-3 weeks, we were just hitting the goals that we have for the year. Another thing, for any utility type is that onboarding a customer is cumbersome. We actually found that 1 out of 3 customers got stuck in the process. It was like, you need to go here and say yes, and you need to go there and say yes, and you need to go to the other website and say yes. Customer says, I want something easy. And part of all these challenges that our customers will experience also are challenges that we, the utilities, have experienced. All these technologies of talking to the cars and managing when they charge and whatnot is brand new. The APIs change all the time. The different players buy and merge and eat each other basically all the time. So it's a very fast-changing landscape. It's really difficult. Perhaps we started, we got this into 2023, technically at the end of 2022, and maybe we went too soon into that. Things are starting to slow down a bit, but there have been so many challenges with the technology and all the mergers and acquisitions that we have decided earlier this month to take the program on pause and allow the market to play out. And we're going then to resume the program in 2026. And we're also planning a very small deployment of charging stations. What we're finding with our customers is that some people like and have electric cars that are compatible with this telematics solution. And others just say, you know what, I don't want you to have so much information about my car. or their car is not connected, so they are okay with us talking with the charging station rather than the car. So for electric cars moving forward, we're actually going to have two branches, the telematic program and the charging station program. Let me now take us home to the last few slides. This shows a graph bar of how often we have been calling events, dispatching our DERMS over the last 10 years. From 2015 to 2017, we were calling events rarely, 25 times per year or something like that. Well, maybe a bit more, 25 during summer, year-round, perhaps 35. This is because we were only playing one song. We were only working with the coincident peak. We were only doing peak avoidance. Then we added coincident peak and time of day. We were able to play two different musical pieces, and the number of events grew up. Then we added Bright Like the Sun, and a couple of years ago, we started also adding Run Like the Wind. The more music we know how to play, the more we can participate and support the electric grids. And you might not be able to see this number here, but this is 10,000. So last year, we dispatched over 10,000 times our DERMS. There were 10,000 in an hour, you have 80 in an hour. In a year, you have 8760 hours. So we were doing, you could say, an average of more than once per hour. The reality is that we were bunching up all these different events. But we are part of operations. 10 years ago, coincident peak was something that will happen very rarely. Other utilities will be maybe once or twice per year. For grid flexibility, you really become part of operations of the utility. You do it every day, you do it multiple times a day. So what are the future activities? What is it I'm going to be starting tomorrow? And you can see there the definition of tomorrow. Well, one of the things that we need to do is to grow our programs. I mentioned that we have very aggressive carbon goals. So we need to at least double, most likely triple the number of participants. I'm pretty sure we need to triple the number of participants. We need to add residential batteries to the instruments that we have in the orchestra. We have not done that work yet. We also need to modulate solar noon and overnight wind consumption. Right now, it's kind of like we play the same song, but we play it always at the same volume. Some days we might want to play it louder or more quiet, based on how much wind or solar is on the grid, or maybe start playing a little bit earlier or a little bit later on the day based on winds. On variability, I meant to say. And the last 2 points is, we need to continue our plan for participation on the energy imbalance market and to mitigate the future winter peak. So with that said, I want to thank you very much for have attended my presentation. And Peter, I think that now you're going to have some questions for me.
Yes, thanks again, Pablo. So question, have you considered using heat pump water heaters, which might consume about 25 to 30% of the energy of the resistance water heaters?
Yes, we have. Let me go back to that slide. So if I'm making you dizzy, guys. Yes, we have, and we do have a few of those. Even here it says heat pump and electric resistive types. So heat pumps, water heater, yeah, they use less energy. So in that sense, they're really nice. The challenge with those water heaters is if you want to retrofit them in an existing home, is difficult because they need a significant amount of air volume surrounding them for the heat pump to work. Rule of thumb is around 900 cubic feet. So in most apartment complexes, that is where typically you have an electric water heater, at least in Fort Collins, you have this teeny little closet, extremely narrow, that just has enough space for the water heater. The door is closed, and there isn't enough air around for the heat pump to work efficiently, so you don't get the benefits with the heat pumps. We have so far deployed around 200 of these water heaters, and only in 3 places we have been able to deploy one that was heat pump. Those were cases that they have the water heater on an unfinished basement, or that they had it on the garage. Now, for new construction, I think that heat pump water heaters could be a great fit, because at that point you can build the new construction with some sort of ducts or whatnot to bring the air that the water heater needs to participate, you know. Otherwise, you are really talking of not getting enough air or having to install ducts into homes. And we try that with a few customers. You know, we float that idea and they say, no, I just want the water heater. I don't want you to do a remodel and have, you know, to punch holes through the walls of my house. So that is the challenge with retrofitting a heat pump water heater. Again, I think that in new construction is going to be a great fit.
Okay, great. Could you give a little more detail on the DERMS used in your program and what specifically they accomplish?
Sure. So the DERMS, the software that we use, is a commercial product by Itron. Itron is the company that supports the software. The name of the software is IntelliSource. And what this software does, actually I can show this slide. This might be a better slide to show what it does. This is a high view of our system architecture. And at the bottom, we have all the different equipment, all the different DRs. You know, we have the thermostat from Ecobee, the thermostat for Residio, the water heaters, commercial buildings, grid-integrated water heaters, electric cars, Sensi, those are the ones that we install. All these devices communicate through different communication channels. It could be through the cloud, it could be through Wi-Fi, it could be through cellular communications. So they communicate with IntelliSource. So what IntelliSource does is takes care of all the complexity on all the communications with all these different systems and presents to upper systems that could be our servers, our operators, with sort of like a single glass of paint, just one dashboard that tell us how many water heaters we have, how many of them are running. It includes some forecast that tell us how much energy we can dump, you know, consume, or how much energy we can shift to consume later on. So it's a lot of APIs, open standards, communication protocols. The software also, one thing that does is not truly critical on a DERMS, but it's extremely nice to have it. When customer call us and they say that either they want to be enrolled or that they're experiencing a problem, it records all that information. So we can use that and know, okay, we got a call, you know, from this particular customer on this particular day, and we have information about the history of when the equipment was installed, when the equipment had maintenance last, what was the last time we heard from the customer. So it's a lot of command and control. Again, you know, being able to tell equipment, you know, through all these different communication protocols and communication networks, what to do. We get information back from all these systems. So IntelliSource integrates all that into a single glass of paint that tell us, you know, what is happening in the field. I hope that was enough without being too much.
No, it's good. Can given the orchestration of the strategies and technologies you have identified, what can be said about Fort Collins needing natural gas backup in the 2030 to 2035 range?
That is a question for Platte River Power Authority more than for me, for us. I cannot address that question.
Okay. We have an individual from Tucson, Arizona on. That's great. Welcome, Dwayne. Let's see here.
I was in Tucson at the Pima Airport about a month ago. It was a lot of fun. Sorry, the Pima Museum.
And okay, if somebody wants to contact you afterwards, it's okay to connect you to.
Yes,
I know you guys
share
are
my contact information, please.
you guys are always an open door, and we appreciate that. Okay, here's another question from somebody that doesn't live in Fort Collins. What is approximately the cost of a smart water heater if one buys one on their own? And does it make sense for a homeowner in Excel's territory to go this route, or should I first make sure they have a program on utilizing the technology?
Yeah. So we buy them in bulk, so our price is probably a little bit better, a lot better actually. Probably if you want to buy one of these grid interactive water heaters on your own, you're going to be paying between $850 up to $1,000, depending on the make and model and whatnot, how many years of warranty, all those things. Here at Fort Collins, we actually offer a rebate to buy those, or we're working, I'm not sure if it's live, we're working to have a rebate to buy one of these advanced water heaters, smart water heaters. If you are on Excel service territory, I honestly don't know if they have a program in place or a rebate. Probably they do, but I apologize, I don't know the details. One thing I know is that Excel is gearing up to do a lot of this type of work. We are working with Itron, and Excel is also working with Itron and is going to deploy similar, not quite the same that we're doing ourselves, but it's going to be deploying a similar software. So perhaps in the near future, Excel will offer that type of programs. Now, what some of these water heaters offer, and this is not exactly the same that we do, so let me be really clear here. These water heaters, they have this EcoPort, this little white thingy, this is not to scale, by the way, the water heater is like a meter tall, 3 feet or 4 feet tall. This is maybe 6 inches, if that much. The EcoPort is the communication module that talks back with the utility. And we tell them, to shift energy from on-peak to off-peak. And also we use that for solar consumption and soon for overnight wind consumption. Some of these water heaters, I'm not sure exactly which ones off the top of my head, but some of these water heaters have a very similar EcoPort type of system that allows you as the owner to run a schedule on the water heaters. So if you were to buy one of those and you happen to be on a time of use rate with Excel, you might be able to shift the energy consumption and save some money. Based on our time of use and based on the specifics, I'm not totally familiar with Excel time of use, with the price differential between on-peak and off-peak, but here in Fort Collins, you can save about 1/3 of the energy use of, not 1/3 of the energy use, 1/3 of the operating cost of the water heater. And that is about, let's call it $75 per year. A standard water heater probably is $500 to $600. One of these more advanced ones is, as I was saying, maybe 900. So if we call the differential to be 300 and you save $75 each year, you know, in about 3.5 years, if I did the math right on the top of my head, more like 4, you will be breaking even and saving money afterwards, even if you don't have a rebate from Excel. Sorry if I got too deep on the weeds, you know, I was just trying to provide you with as much information as I could.
That's okay. I would advise, I know Excel has a energy assessment program, and I think that would be, it's always the first place to start. Of course, hot water heaters are, you know, if you have the space, a heat pump hot water heater is great,
Yeah.
but they'll advise, because I don't know if Excel has time of use everywhere. I know it's been rolling out pretty aggressively.
Yes,
So
they are.
that's going to make, I think once they get time of use everywhere, you're going to see a lot more of this, you know, kind of doing what Fort Collins is doing. Here's another question. And again, this one might be a little bit hard to answer, but as PRPA and the four cities go into the wholesale market, and obviously there's a blend of solar peak, windy nights, what effect do you see that having on things, or is it just something that you'll see the data change and you'll adapt?
It's, yeah, who can guess the future? We actually, you know, are in contact with Platte River, the four cities and Platte River. We talk a lot about this. We know that things are likely to change. We know how a few things might change. We don't know how everything will change. One thing I can tell you, I feel comfortable sharing this, is Platte River and the four cities, all the rate analysts are getting together and they are looking at, does the rate structure that we have now in place make sense once we are in an integrated market? So we don't know, you know, they are doing their work. I haven't heard anything from that working group, but probably the retail rates are going to change. I don't think much will happen in the next couple of years, probably more like, you know, late 2020s, you know, everything is really slow in the utilities, but I could see maybe some slightly different rates being rolled out. Perhaps the other 3 cities might consider doing some time of day or time of use type of rates, as completely up to them to make those decisions. Some of the things that we know is probably going to play a role is this energy imbalance market. Is something that grid flexibility could play a role. And that energy imbalance market is on an organized market. The day before, you schedule all the different resources that are going to be run, and you forecast how much energy is going to be needed at each hour of the day, and you prepare all your resources to meet those needs. But if there are deviations, because you know you are producing more energy that is actually being consumed, or more energy is being consumed that you can produce, you might have a small deviations from what you were prepared for. And these type of programs, you know, that they can very quickly react and consume excess energy or reduce for 10, 15 minutes or something like that. The energy consumption, I think, is going to change. When I was talking of that slide that had the frequency, this one, you know, that's where I think the grid interactive water heaters likely playing a big role on that energy imbalance market, because you can do that many times a day if you need to. But yes, we know that things are going to change. We know that we will be able to tap into a lot of the wind resource that is available on the SPP market, more than we have right now. But again, it's very, very difficult to know how everything is going to change. We just know that things are going to change.
Okay, great. Okay, here's a good VPP one. The best orchestra hires the best musicians. Excel's VPP Symphony will pay performance-based compensation for supply-side DERs that deliver dispatchable power, capacity, ancillary services, and wire deferrals. What will the city pay prosumers for those values?
At this time, I cannot address that question. I don't know. I'm more of like the technology person. That is more a question again for Platte River and the rate analyst to address. Sorry, it's just not my area of expertise.
Here's a good one. I'm getting quotes on a rooftop PV system now. It sounds like it may be a while before I can benefit from adding batteries, and that would be able to participate in the system. And I was going to ask you this question anyway. What's the time frame for kind of a battery program being involved?
Take this with a pinch of salt, it's very dynamic. The earliest I will see a battery program is 2027. Now, what do we mean by a battery program? Okay, let's pull us back a bit there. We already in Ft Collins have rebates for batteries. And at times we can call that a battery program, but for that rebate, you get a rebate that helps you with installation. There are some interconnection agreements that are set up about the inverter, and then basically you just use the battery any way you see fit. What I was referring to at the earliest in 2027, it will be a situation more like what I have here with this thing in which there will be like another branch maybe added here that will say an API to some software platform that will go to the batteries. That the earliest I see is 2027. Maybe there could be something in very late 26, but I doubt it. That's something that is being worked on. So it's at least 2 years out. I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually 2028 by the time that we're really to scale up a program in which a battery will communicate with IntelliSource or potentially another DERMS. I'm letting the cat a little bit out of the bag. There might be another DERMS also playing in Ft Collins. And it will be this type of more dynamic, interactive type of situations.
Okay. Any other questions, folks? That's the last one I have. We'll give it a second here. Yeah, it would be interesting. And also it'd be, you guys get to learn a little bit more of what's going on. I know Green Mountain Power, and there's a couple of programs up in the Northeast that seem to be working very well, but they're also, you get one kind of battery. It's, in standardization, of course, is just as you mentioned with the EVs, is a big challenge. Okay, well, if that's the end of the questions, I will go ahead and oh, do you also have programs that help people electrify their home devices? And I'm assuming, Dwayne, are you talking about existing gas appliances like induction stoves, hot water heaters? Yes.
I should have checked, what all the rest of my team is doing. I don't know if we have any specific program in place. We're constantly talking about, how to help people electrify and some of the challenges, with panel upgrades and things like that. I'm not positive we have electrification programs in place. I don't know. I hope that if any of my coworkers happen to be listening and know, maybe you can put it on the Q&A and Peter can read the answer. But I don't even know if I have any of my team mates in the call right now.
I think it's sort of baked into Epic to a degree, but it's also relative. For retrofitting, it's, we've had a number of presentations and it can be a challenge. One thing to do, if you have a basement, you have the space, heat pump, hot water heater, pretty plug and play. Older house, well, induction cook stoves, get them. Those are pretty easy. But okay, and actually, speaking of which, I probably need to get a new Epic presentation up. It's been about 3 years since we had that discussion. So anyway, Pablo, I want to thank you again. Oh gosh, here again, one more. Okay, this is the last one. Um, is there a performance benefit using a grid edge DERMS versus a true grid DERMS? So this is right up your alley, I would say, technical.
Could you please repeat the question? I'm trying to understand it.
A grid edge DERMS
Yeah.
versus a true grid DERMS.
And he was asking about performance, I think.
A performance benefit.
Hmm.
And I feel like I've heard those terms, and I'm not.
So whoever asked that question is someone that is deep on the weeds of this work. So yes, I didn't explain all the stuff, so let me briefly cover this. A grid edge tends to be more what a distribution utility might want to look at. And so that's the edge, is the one that will probably talk directly with the equipment. And then there is the grid or enterprise DERM that is more what a generation entity might want to use. But even that is a little bit of a simplification. When you're talking on the industry, if you get 3 different people and ask them what is the difference between a grid edge and a grid DERMS and an edge DERMS, you ask 3 people, you get 5 answers probably. Is evolving a lot. I will say that the performance you get, and that even depends on which mix of software platforms you are using, is an enterprise or grid DERMS tends to focus more about the management of the generation resources and filling in the gaps when there might be, or anticipating that there might be a gap on the generation relative to the load. And an edge DERM is more like it listens from the enterprise, from the grid DERMS, that, hey, there is going to be the need for 5 megawatts. And it tells the edge DERMS that, hey, give me 5 megawatts. But then the edge DERMS is the one that, maybe working with another software that is called an ADMS, decides which units. Is it going to be 5 megawatts coming from grid interactive water heaters, or is it going to be 5 megawatts coming from electric cars, or is it going to be 2.5 and 2.5? So they are fine-tuned to 2 different ends of the grid. Some grid DERMS explore getting into the distribution area. My personal opinion is that maybe there is one out there that is really good at doing both. I haven't seen it. And I will say the same for the edge DERMS. I've seen a few of them trying to get into the grid area, but I haven't seen anyone to do really good work at both ends. So I think that the performance, the benefit is, if you really want to have everything from generation to distribution working well, you want to have the right orchestra playing, on the right area that you're working, either the distribution or the generation sector.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap it up then. Again, Pablo, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at the info@crest-energy.org. I monitor that, or a lot of you have my personal, it's p.eberle@crest-energy.org, but I'll be able to get you anything that you need. And everyone, have a great evening.